don't know. There's some interesting picks in here. I'll say that. I'll just start off by saying Wyatt Davis, on the basis of 1 year, has no business being on the first team all-decade offensive line. And I know timing works against him because he only had 1 year in the decade. But, I don't think his full body of work matches up with is Elflein on the second team? Is that what I'm being told? It's so convoluted the way they dropped this thing. I know Price is on the first team, which is how it should be.
We'll talk about Price. Keep going, Steve.
Yeah, but I think if Elflein's on the second team and Davis is on the first team, that's backwards because Elflein was like a 3.5-year starter or something, maybe even 4 full years. I don't even know. And played on a national championship team. The one to me, and I got a basketball one too that we can touch on in a moment. And I like the premise of what they've done here. And I think that the panel that they used for basketball was a lot of their own in-house people, sprinkled in with some Teddy Greenstein and some Mike DeCourcy, who may have more of a world view. But at least for the basketball one, I didn't notice anybody with an Ohio State pedigree, which there's plenty. I mean, Jim Jackson's Fox affiliated. He would have been a perfect guy to vote on that. For football, I'm not sure who's making these calls. Maybe we'll get the panel when it's all done. You got to figure, I would assume Josh Perry and maybe Laurinaitis are probably on that.
And Stan Jackson.
And maybe Stan Jackson as well. And Glenn Mason has Ohio State ties, although, people remember him more as the Minnesota head coach. But aside from all that, I will never understand how they picked running backs and went with Jonathan Taylor. I know 2,000-yard rusher. That's great. And Saquon Barkley, kind of the human highlight film from Penn State. Also, that's great. But to the exclusion of Ezekiel Elliott. And, as my friend Terry Gilliam, I break out this line all the time. He was busting chops on some guy about all the work that he had done or something. And he says, I see all the pictures you've taken, which were hero, talking to his fellow photographer. I see all the pictures. I see your stuff's published everywhere, as he was cutting on the guy. For Jonathan Taylor and Saquon Barkley, I see all the national championships you won. And Ohio State rode Ezekiel Elliott to the national championship, the holy grail of the sport. And people say, he's never a first-team All-American. Well, those teams are announced anywhere from November the 30th to December the 7th, anytime before or after. Every website's got one. And as of that day, he was not the first-team All-American. But when he had 700 yards in the postseason, Wisconsin, number 12 ranked team and top defense in the country, Alabama, number 1 team, and Oregon, number 2, or vice versa, whatever that was. Again, I see all the 200-yard games Jonathan Taylor had against teams that were ranked in the top 2. I see all the 200-yard games Saquon Barkley had against teams that were ranked in the top 2, 0. So I do not endorse. If the whole selection is flawed like that is, then it's a sham, is what it is, because you should be determined by. I know individual success and statistics have to figure into this, and they rightfully should. And maybe those guys had better numbers, but this guy didn't have bad numbers. What was it, 17 or 1,800 the year they won it, and then another 1,800 the year after? Plus, he was the AAU Sullivan Award winner, which was the best or the top amateur athlete in the United States of America for the calendar year of 2014. I see all the Sullivan Awards and Heisman trophies that Saquon Barkley and Jonathan Taylor won. So good players, great players. And it's too bad somebody gets left off. But for him to be on the second team when he was the driving force behind a national championship, to me, is completely ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm all in favor of Jonathan Taylor being there, but Saquon Barkley over Ezekiel Elliott. Barkley
No way.
1,496 yards in his second year. That was the most he rushed for in a season, and Zeke had 2 1,800-yard seasons. So, that math to me doesn't work. Yeah, he had great highlights. You know who also had great highlights? Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah, 85-yard run against Alabama. The Indiana game was really incredible. What do you have? A
Yeah.
60-yard touchdown, a 70-yard touchdown, and an 80-yard touchdown.
And they needed all of them.
Yeah, they needed all of them because the defense couldn't stop anybody that day. But that was quite a shootout with Cardale and JT kind of jockeying back and forth. Yeah, that was crazy.